Masechet Baba Mesia Daf Yod Dalid. Yesterday we were discussing a loan document. A borrower writes a loan document, gives it to the lender, and the lender can use it to collect his loan. Now, if in the document the borrower says, you have a lien on my property, then certainly everybody would agree that the lender can go and use that lien. And if the borrower does not have free property there with him, and does not have possessions, then the lender can go after property that he had owned at the time of the loan and that he in the meantime sold. The lender can go and repossess that. That's for sure true if it says so in the document. Hachamim said in a braita that we saw yesterday that echad zeh ve'echad zeh gover min nechasim meshu'badim. Even if it does not say so in the promissory note, it's just promissory. This says you owe me $1,000, and it doesn't say anything about getting a lien on the land. There's no guarantee regarding the loan. According to Hachamim, the lender can still go after that sold property and repossess it. So we're going to analyze that. Amar Shemuel, Mai ta'amaihu d'Rabbanan. What's their reason? It doesn't say a lien in it. How come we can go and repossess that sold property? Sabrei achriut ta'ut soferhu, because he thinks that omission of a guarantee in the loan is just a scribal error. We assume that nobody's going to lend money out without a guarantee, and especially if you're going through the trouble of writing it down. If it's an oral loan, that's one thing. So then, okay, I trust you. Here, you want $100? All right, I'll trust that you'll pay it back. There's no lien on property. But if you're going through the trouble to write a document, that means this is a serious thing, and you're not just trusting the person because you want written proof. So then we assume that that the borrower is offering a lien to the lender, and even if it's not written in it, that's just the scribe's mistake. The scribe messed up and skipped it. But the intention of everyone is that there should be a lien. Amar le Rava bar Itai le Rav Idi bar Avin. Umi amar Shemuel hachi, v'amar Shemuel, shebach, shefar, v'she'ibud, sarich limalech. So we have Rava bar Itai asks Rav Idi bar Avin, did Shemuel really say that? Did you assume that there's a lien? Shemuel said another statement that seems to be the opposite. When there's a deed of sale, the scribe has to make sure and ask. He asked the seller who's giving it to the buyer, and he'll ask the buyer, listen, buyer, in case this land that you're buying gets repossessed, right? What if it should happen that the seller owes someone money and he can't pay, and then they come and take this land from you? Are you going to demand shevach, let's say enhancement, that you put into the land? You put some money into the land, you build a nicer fence, you improve the land, and now they're going to repossess the land. You have a right, first of all, for let's say he's paying $1 million for it. So you have a right to collect the $1 million back. That's the sale price. But let's say you also put $100,000 into the land and improved it. So then, do you want to get the $100,000? And furthermore, shefar, there's a couple of different interpretations of that. But let's go with the one that says this is talking about an increased value of the land. The land value went up. The real estate went up. That went up $200,000. So do you want to put in the document that you get a right for that? And furthermore, let's say it's repossessed and the seller does not have cash on hand to pay you back the sale price. Do you want to have a lien on his other properties so that you can get paid back? So since you see that the scribe asks all these things, that means that sometimes he can say, yes, I want that, or no, I don't want that. But we don't assume that it has to be in there. So that, according to this, if it doesn't have a guarantee in a note, in a document, if it doesn't say a guarantee, then that means that the buyer did not ask for it and the scribe left it out on purpose, and therefore we should not assume that there's automatically a guarantee for repossessed land. So lema manda amarha la amarha. Maybe Shemuel had two different students, and whoever quoted Shemuel saying this didn't quote the other thing. There's just a controversy, a dispute about what Shemuel said. Either he assumed that there's a guarantee, or he assumed that there's not a land guarantee. No, la kasha. Could be that Shemuel really did say both of them. And there's no contradiction. The first statement of Shemuel, that was talking about a loan document. Nobody's going to give money in a loan just like that for nothing and without a guarantee to make sure that he can get paid back. And so therefore, even if he doesn't say in the document that the seller has a lien on the lender has a lien on the borrower's property, still we assume it. Whereas the second statement, where he says that the scribe has to ask, do you want that? And if it's not in there, we assume that he didn't ask for it. That's talking about a sale document, because sometimes a person will buy land for a day, and he'll say, it's okay, and if it gets repossessed, fine, it gets repossessed, I'm okay with that. It's built into the sale price that he knows that it can be repossessed, and he'll use it for a day or a month or one season, whatever it is. He'll get the benefit that he needs from it, and he doesn't require that he'll get paid back from the liened property of the seller in case it gets repossessed. And we have a story to back this up. Like the Abu Bar Ihi, that's his name, he bought an apartment from his sister. And then after he bought it, he paid the price, and then a creditor of the sister came and repossessed it. The sister owed this guy money, didn't have money herself to pay, and the apartment got repossessed. So Abu Bar Ihi came to Shemuel for judgment. They said, I want my sister to pay me back, and she should give me land that she owned, that she had sold. I should have a guarantee, a lien on her property. Amar le katva lach achrayut. Says, well, when you made the document of sale, did she write that you have a guarantee on her property in case it gets repossessed? Amar le la. The brother Abu Bar Ihi said, no, we didn't write a guarantee. Amar le imken zil lishlama. And so Shemuel said, well, then you cannot collect anything, right? Go home in peace. You have no case. You cannot collect from you cannot repossess her land that she had sold. But Abu Bari, he knows his traditions. Didn't Shemuel, the master, you yourself say that if you're missing a guarantee in a document, it's just a scribal error, but we assume it. אמר לה, הנמילה בשטרי הלוואה, אבל בשטרי מכך וממכר, לה, דעבד אינש דזבין יראה ליומי. He says, when I said that, we assume that there's a guarantee on property. I said that regarding a loan, because a person's not going to give out money without a guarantee to repossess the borrower's property if he needs to. But when it comes to buying and selling, not necessarily. Sometimes a person might just buy land for a day. Maybe you just wanted this apartment for a couple of nights, and so you bought it, and it was worth it to you to buy and use for a short time. And then if it gets repossessed, you didn't need it anymore anyway. Sometimes that happens, and therefore we cannot assume, unless you say so and tell the scribe to put it in, that you want a guarantee on the land. We do not assume that it would be so. Amar Abaye, Reuven שמכר שדה לשמעון באחריות, ובא בעל חוב דראובן וקרא תריף לימינה, דינה הוא דאזיל ראובן ומשתעה דינה בהדה. ולמה זה אמר לה, לבעל דברים דידי את? דאמר לה, דמפקת מינה, עלי דידי הדר. Abaye gives a new ruling. If Reuben sells a piece of land to Shimon, and they say it's with a property guarantee, and then a creditor of Reuben says, "Hey, Reuven, you owe me money." Reuven says, "I don't have any money." Okay, I'm going to your liened property, that you sold to Shimon, and so he goes to Shimon and he goes to take it. The law is that Reuven can come to Bet Din and argue his case against that creditor. And we don't say that the creditor can tell Reuven, "You are not my litigant, right? I have nothing to do with you. I'm taking Shimon's property. You're out of the picture already." No, we do not say that, because Reuven can say, whatever you take from Shimon, Shimon's going to turn around and collect from me. That's the law. If someone buys property and then it gets repossessed, the buyer can go to the seller and say, "You have to give me back that sale price, and plus, if they say so, also the enhancement and the increased value." And so therefore, Reuven, it is in his interest to defend Shimon, the buyer of the land, and so he has a right to come to court and offer proofs and arguments on behalf of Shimon to make sure that land will not be repossessed. Another version of what Abaye said, even if that sale that Reuven gave to Shimon did not have a guarantee in the document. There's no guarantee. In which case, should the creditor of Reuven come and say, Reuven, pay me back. Reuven says, I don't have any money. Okay, he goes to Shimon, which means he takes Shimon's property, and Shimon has no recourse because there's no guarantee. He didn't ask for a guarantee from the buyer, Reuven, and even if the Shimon just loses his land and Reuven doesn't have to pay the buyer back, nevertheless, Reuven can still come to court and say, hey, to the creditor, he'll argue whatever he has to argue. There never was a loan, the loan was paid back, there's another piece of land that you can take instead. Whatever he wants to argue, he can, even though we would think that the creditor can say, you're not my litigant. I'm just dealing with Shimon. He has property that's mine. I have a lien on his land. Right? You go home. No, Reuven could still say, I don't want Shimon to have a grievance against me, even though I'm not going to have to pay him $1. Still, he's my neighbor. I don't want him to be upset at me that I sold him land and now this land is taken away. He's going to have a grudge against me. I don't want that, and therefore Reuven has a right to come to court and issue arguments. Ve'amar Abaye, another law that Abaye taught. Reuven shemachar sedeh l'Shimon shelo b'achriyut v'yasu aleha asikin. Reuven sells a piece of land to Shimon without a guarantee. Right? No guarantee. This is a final sale. If it gets repossessed, Shimon, that's your problem. And in the meantime, some disputants come and say, there's rumors, hey, that land, no, it's really mine. It was not, it was wrong. I have a lien on it. You owe me. They didn't prove their case yet, but they already started presenting it. And before Shimon, the buyer, acquires it, he can renege, right? Even though they agreed and they made a sale price, and it's okay, I'm gonna buy it, but he didn't actually acquire it yet. And all of a sudden, there's rumors come and say Reuven this land is going to be repossessed from him. Shimon could say, you know what, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this. However, once he takes possession, that's it. The sale is final, and he cannot then renege on the deal and said, oh, there are people that are causing problems. I want my money back. No, that's it. The sale is done. Because the Reuven, the seller, can say, you bought a tied sack. In other words, if you buy a sack that's tied up and you say, whatever's in it, surprise. It might be really nice things, right? What's behind door number 1? You never know. It might be something that's worthless. So whenever you enter into a deal, right, here's this land, no achrayut, no guarantee. Okay, you might get a good deal because there's no guarantee. Maybe he's paying a lower amount for it. And maybe it will never be repossessed and he got a good deal. Or maybe not. Maybe it will be repossessed and he ends up getting nothing. So that's that you take the risks and the rewards. So the sale is final and he cannot renege on the deal. Now, when do we say the sale is final, that the land was acquired? When the buyer walks along the borders. That's a form of acquisition, right? He's walking along the borders and inspecting it, or he does something on the land, so that's a form of acquisition. We see that in the Torah itself, when Hashem tells Bnei Israel, Kol makom asher tidroch kaf raglechem, bo lachem nitativ. Anywhere that you walk in the land, it will be given to you, because that's an act of acquisition. You have to walk the land, right, or along its borders, and then it is acquired. Okay, so that's the statement of Abaye, and this also has another version. This law applies even if there is a guarantee in the loan. Once the acquisition is done, the buyer cannot renege on the deal, even if there are people that come and start causing rumors and says, "Oh, the sale, that land is really mine. I have a lien on it. It was mine before." Nevertheless, the buyer cannot renege on the deal. Here, you might have thought otherwise. You might have thought, since there is a guarantee on the land, and therefore, if it gets repossessed, then in any case, the buyer will go to the seller and get his money back, which is basically the same as undoing the deal. So I might have thought that once these people come and are spreading rumors about the land and making claims against it, so then the buyer can renege on the deal even after it was closed, because that's the same as just getting his money back once it's repossessed. But we don't say that. Instead, the seller can say, show me your document of authorization to repossess. Whenever something goes to a land gets repossessed by a bet din, the bet din will issue a document to the buyer and say, here, we recognize that your land that you bought was repossessed, and there was a guarantee on that land, and therefore you have a right to go to the buyer and get your money back. But until that point, until these people that are making these claims prove it and go to court and really repossess the land, and then they issue that authorization of repossession, then and only then, Reuven, the seller, can say, show me that, and then I'll give it back to you. But right now, I don't have to give it back to you, because Reuven thinks that these claims are just false rumors. He'll be able to fight them in court. They're not going to repossess it, and the sale is final only until such time. It is final until such time as it's officially repossessed, and the court then issues that document. But otherwise, the buyer cannot just renege on the deal after it's closed, even though there are claimants. Itamar. המוכר שדה לחברו נמצאת שאינה שלו. רב אמר יש לו מעות ויש לו שבח, ושמואל אמר מעות יש לו, שבח אין לו. Now, in this case, someone sells a field that isn't his. He steals a field, makes believe that it's his, and then turns it over and sells it to someone else. Now, once he's found to be a thief, right, obviously the true owner, the original owner, is going to come to the buyer and say, this is my field. The guy that sold it to you was a con artist. It was never his to sell. He sold you the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, so there's a machloket about what he can get paid back. Everyone agrees that the sale price, the buyer can get the sale price back from the thief. But Rav says not only can collect the sale price, even the improvement. If the buyer in the meantime improved the land, right, put some money into it, now it's worth more, or the price went up, so then you can say, well, look, I put money into it, and now it's more valuable. So the buyer can collect also that from the seller, the thief. Shmuel, however, says he can collect the original sale price, but not the enhancement, because what he enhanced the field, why should the thief is only responsible for the money that he stole, which is the sale price, right, which he took illegally, but he never owned the land to begin with. So this enhancement that the buyer put into it has nothing to do with the thief. The thief says, you put money into someone else's land. The thief says, not my problem. I don't have to pay for that. What if the buyer put in the document when he bought it from the thief and said, listen, should this get repossessed and there's enhancement to the land, you have to pay for the enhancement. What about in that case? Right? What would Shmuel say? Did Shmuel say over here that he does not get the value of the enhancement only because he didn't specify that in the document? But if he does specify it, then he would collect it. Or there's the reason of Shemuel is that since there is really no land here, that's owned by the thief. The thief just stole the land. It's not actually his land. So when he gives over the land, the buyer didn't actually take land at all. He maybe walked around on the land, but it wasn't his to walk around on. So therefore, since he never actually got the land, not even for 1 second, legitimately, all that happened here was an exchange of money. that the buyer gave $1 million to this thief, and now the thief has to repay the $1 million. If you say that he has to repay the added amount, the enhancement, all right, then what will look like if anybody looking on? The buyer gave the thief $1 million. Now, and he didn't get any land because this land was owned by a third party, the actual owner the whole time, and so there's really nothing that was bought. And then some days later, the thief is giving back $1.1 million. And that looks like interest, even if it's technically not interest because really it was a sale. But if it was a sale, then that's fine, right? If I sell you something at one price and then the price goes up and now I buy it back at a higher price, that's permitted because there's an actual item that went back and forth. But here, since the land was not legitimately owned by anybody, not the seller and not the buyer, so then this is too similar to interest. That's the two sides of the question. Amar lehu in vela v'rafria bideh. Rav Huna, first he said yes, and he said no. He wasn't sure. It was a really good question, and he didn't have a clear answer. Itmar, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shemuel, Ma'ot yesh lo, shevach en lo. Af al pi shepiresh lo et hashevach. Mai ta'ama, kevan da karka en lo, sechar ma'otav omed venotel. But here we have an answer, because Rav Nachman said in the name of Shemuel that when a buyer buys something from a thief, and then it gets repossessed, so the buyer can go to the thief and get the sale price, but not the improvement. Even if he specified that, if it gets repossessed, I want the improvement. Still, he doesn't get it. Why? Because the land was never his to begin with. So all he can do is take his own money that he gave over. He gave over $1 million. It really was not a sale, so he just deposited his money with the thief. The thief took it illegally, so he could say, I want my money back, and that's all he can do. And so we see that it's the second, and the second one is correct, because according to the first, if you specified that I get the enhancement, then you would get the enhancement. But here, you see Rav Nachman said, Shemuel, even if you specify, you don't get anything back. He can only take his own money. He can't get more because that would look like ribit, and that would be prohibited. We now challenge this statement of Rav Nachman. Rava cites a Mishnah to challenge him. The Mishnah says, Iti be Ravad Rav Nachman, en motzi'in achilat perot, ulishbach karkaot, v'dimzon ha'ishav habanot minichasim mishubadim, mipene tikun ha'olam. We do not repossess someone's property in order to pay for produce. In other words, we're going to talk about exactly what this case is, but we're going to start off assuming we're talking about the same case of a robber steals a field, and then he sells it to a buyer unknowingly, who doesn't know it's stolen property, for $1 million. And then it gets repossessed. In the meantime, the property has some ripe produce that also is taken away. So the owner of the property says, the buyer of the property says, I want that produce. So he can go and collect it, presumably from the robber, but he just can't collect it from liened property of the robber, sold property of the robber, but only available. But you see here that he can get paid for produce. And here's the part that's relevant for us, and he can get the enhancement of the land. We assume it's talking about the same case. A buyer buys land unknowingly from a robber. He paid $1 million for it. He put improvement into the land. Now it's worth 1.1. And so when he comes, it gets repossessed. He comes to get his money back. He gets the $1 million, and he can also get the enhancement, the $100,000, but he can't get it from nechasim mishubadim. He just can't go after sold property that the robber had sold, but he can get it back from available property. Right? That's a negation, a contradiction to Rav Nachman's opinion about Shemuel that the buyer cannot get shevach. Furthermore, one cannot collect lien property in order to pay for the sustenance of his wife and his daughters. The reason for all these things is Mishnah Gitin, is because of Tikkun Ha'olam, the betterment of the world. It's true, there are cases where you're going to have to repossess land, but that's only if it's a loan and it's written in a document, and these are things that generally are publicized sized. And so a buyer knows, okay, what are all the loans that are outstanding with this guy? He has $3 million outstanding loans. Well, let me see if that's worth the risk, right? What other properties did he have? What order are they going to be paid in? And so we can assess the risk and then have some reasonable assuredness that this land, that he'll keep the land. But all these items here are not a fixed amount. Who knows how much this guy, the seller, or his heirs will have to pay in order to sustain the wife and the daughter. It's an unpredictable amount. And if you say that any time that the wives and daughters or the other items have to be paid, then we're going to go and repossess someone's land. Who buys it, you know what? No one's ever going to want to buy land because they have no idea what risk they're taking. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now, let's ask the question. The Mishnah only says that the buyer cannot repossess from sold land, but from available land he can. And one of the items is enhancement. Is this Mishnah not talking about our very case where a buyer buys stolen land from a robber and now it gets repossessed and he wants to get his money back and he wants to get enhancement also back, and so this Mishnah says he can collect enhancement from available assets of the robber, and that goes against what Rav Nachman said in the name of Shemuel, that he cannot get that. So that's a challenge against Rav Nachman, and we answer lo beba'al chov. No, this Mishnah is not talking about selling land from a robber, but rather a regular case of a creditor where you have someone who a borrower that gives a lien to a lender, and then he sells that land. He's the legitimate owner of the land, and so the buyer buys it from the borrower, and then the borrower defaults on his loan. The lender comes and repossesses it, and that's a case where that sale was totally valid, and so the buyer can come in there in that case and have a valid claim. It says, look, as I said when I wanted to buy the land, I put in the document that I get paid back and I get enhancement. In that case, certainly he gets enhancement. That was Shemuel's second law that he said above, and that's what the Mishnah is talking about, but it's not talking about stolen land. Okay, we ask about that. Ibe ba'al chov emaresha. And mosi'in achilat perot, v'ibe ba'al chov mi'it le'pere, v'amar Shemuel, ba'al chov govet ha'shevach, shevach in, aval perot la. If you say that this Mishnah entirely is the second clause specifically is talking about a case of a loan, well then the entire Mishnah must be talking about a case of a loan. And how are you going to reconcile that with the first item on the list, which is that one cannot take the produce? Now, what if this is talking about a loan? Does the lender get the produce in the first place? After all, Shemuel said that the lender who repossesses repossesses land, he can repossess the land, and he can also get the enhancement of the land. But that means he can get enhancement, but not the produce. In other words, we have a case where someone borrows money, and he gives the lender a lien on that land. That borrower sells the land to a buyer, and he ends up defaulting on the loan, and the lender comes and repossesses that land. And now let's say in the meantime, there's ripe produce on the land. So now the lender comes. Will the lender take the produce? The answer is no. Shemuel says he doesn't get the produce. So the buyer can say, hold on, before you take the land, I'm going to collect all the produce, and then you take the land. So therefore, there would not be a situation where the buyer would have to come and collect the produce from the seller, who is the borrower, right? Because the lender will not have taken the produce. Lender doesn't have a right to it in the first place. So the Mishnah would not need to say that, the borrower can retrieve the produce only from available assets, but not from liened assets. You wouldn't have to say that. So therefore, you see that the first case of produce doesn't make sense if it's talking about case of a loan. אלא פשיטה בגוזר ונגזל, ומדרשה בגוזר ונגזל, sefa name בגוזר ונגזל. Therefore, it must be that this clause about produce is talking about a case of stolen property. And if the first clause is about stolen property, then the next one also about enhancement must also be talking about stolen property. And so we return to our challenge against Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel, because according to this Mishnah, a buyer who buys stolen property from a robber unknowingly can collect the enhancement from available property, right? Just not from lien property. And that goes against Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel, who said that the buyer cannot collect the value of the enhancement of the land. So we're back to that challenge, and we answer, Midi iria, ha-kedita, ha-kedita. Are these cases comparable? Each case follows a scenario that's appropriate to it. The first clause, which was about produce, that was talking about a case of robbery, because that's where the buyer would have a right to say, hey, this is my produce, and you have to pay me for that produce. But the second clause, which was about the enhancement of the land, that was talking about a creditor, where he has a right to go and get that, get the enhancement of the land that now was repossessed. He can go and collect that back from the buyer. But you don't have to say they're all talking about the same clause. And now, therefore, we resolve our problem. The second clause about enhancement was not talking about robbery, and Shemuel, Rav Nachman, in the name of Shemuel, was talking about robbery, and so they're talking about two different cases, and therefore there is no problem. Okay, we follow up with another question. We have a braita that elaborates on the Mishnah and does not explain it the way you just did, because this braita says, in what would be a case scenario where the buyer could collect for the enhancement of the land. You see, clearly, this is talking about a case of robbery. Someone robs land from his friend, and now it gets repossessed. See, what's missing here is that he sold it. כשהוא גובה את הקדם מנכסים משועבדים ובשבח גובה מנכסים בני חורין. When he comes to collect, so we have to kind of read in. It's very hard to understand this braita. It's missing words. Let's add words. If he would sell it, then when the buyer would come to collect, because his land was repossessed by the original owner, the buyer can collect the sale price from sold property of the robber, but the enhancement that he put in, he can only collect from available property of the robber. So that's the braita. Let's ask, what exactly is the case? If you read the braita as is without adding words, well then that would sound like if he stole property and it got repossessed, meaning from the robber, because the Beit Din took it away from him, when meaning the robber, comes to collect, but the robber, who does he collect from? Nobody owes the robber any money, right? That can't be. Gazlan miman gaveh. Who is he collecting from? So therefore, it must be that we're missing some words. Therefore, we'll add words as we did when we read this baraita, that he stole land, he sold it to someone, now it got repossessed by the rightful owner, the buyer can come and collect for the enhancement of the land from available property. So you see here is a braita that clearly, well, not so clearly, but with these added words, is against Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel. But Shemuel could answer, Amalach, lav teruse kametaras, teres name beba'al chov. Didn't you have to re-explain this baraita? You already had to add words, and you recognize that the wording of this baraita is not exact. So once already, you're changing around the words, so you know what? I'll change around the words also. And when it says here gazal, no, it doesn't mean gazal. It was really talking about a creditor. Now, normally we wouldn't go and just change the words of a braita in order to answer a question. But in this case, because a braita in any case there's something wrong with the wording and you have to tighten it up, as we say in Arabic, one way or another. So therefore he says, okay, this Baraita's wording is not reliable and I can explain it in a different way. We next have one more challenge against Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel from another section of that Baraita. Tashema. לאכילת פירות כסד, הרי שגזל שדה מחברו, והרי היא עושה מתחת ידו, כשהוא גובה את הקרן מנכסים משובדים, ופירות גובה מנכסים בני חורין. This Baraita is also commenting on that Mishnah in Gitin, and it says, what is the case of consuming produce if someone stole property from his friend and it gets repossessed? When we're going to analyze again who the he is. Is it the robber? Is it a buyer? When he comes to collect, he can collect the principal amount from sold property, but he can collect the produce only from available property. Now we ask, what is the case? If you take this word for word literally, so he stole land, it got repossessed, and the robber, is coming to collect money from whom? Who owes him money? He's the robber. We just take his land and he doesn't get anything else. Rather, it must be talking about a case where the robber stole the land from someone else and then he sold it to a buyer, and the buyer improved the land, and because of the improvement, then it produced ripe fruit, and now we're talking about the buyer coming to collect that enhancement that he put into the land. Although it's talking about fruit here, that fruit is a result of the enhancement, and so therefore is part of it. This is therefore a challenge against Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel, who says that someone who buys stolen property does not have a right to collect enhancement from the robber, but here it sounds like he does. We're going to have three different answers to the question here. Amar Rava, hacha b'may askinan kigon shegazal sede mechabero melea perot, v'achal et haperot, v'chafar ba borot shichin u'ma'arot, u'ba nigzal legabot keren, gobem nechasim meshubadin, ba nigzal legabot perot, gobem nechasim b'nei chorin. Rava says, we're not talking about a buyer. There's no buyer in this case. Rather, a robber stole a field from someone else, and the field already had ripe produce on it, and the robber consumes all of the produce, and he ruins the field. He digs in it pits and ditches and caves, and so now he cannot return the field as is, because the owner of the field says, what is this? This is not the field that you stole. This is a ruined field. So therefore, the original owner of the field, the victim of the robbery, can come and collect the principal amount of the land that was stolen, that he can collect from the robber's liened property, even that which was sold. But when he comes to collect the produce that was on it when he stole it, that the original owner can only collect from unsold available property of the robber. So you see that this entire Mishnah Baraita is talking about the collecting from the robber himself, not by the victim, not by a buyer. There is no buyer in this case, and therefore there's no challenge to Rav Nachman, name of Shemuel. Second answer, Rabba ba Rav Huna Amar, Kigon shenetaluha masikin, ba nigzal ligbot keren, gobem nechasim meshubadim, ba nigzal ligbot perot, gobem nechasim bnei chorin. Rabba ba Rav Huna also says that we're not talking about a case where someone bought the land from the robber. There's no buyer here. Rather, it's thugs that came into town, and they didn't take all the land. If they take all the land, then the robber is not responsible. But they already have a relationship with this thief, and they said, give us the land. And he said, here, take this land, the one that he stole, that was stolen. In that case, the robber is responsible to pay back the original owner. So the original owner, the victim, the nigzal, comes to collect the principal amount. He can collect from even liened property that was sold. But when he comes to collect the fruit that was on the land, he can only get that from unsold property. And again, since we're not talking about someone that bought land from the robber, therefore this has nothing to do with the law of Shemuel, and so there is no question. Rava lo amar ke Rabba bar Rav Huna, harehi yos'a mitachat yado bedina mashma. Now, how come Rava, the first answer, didn't say that it was talking about thugs that came to collect it? Well, he'll say because the Baraita says it's taken out of his hands. Taken out of his hands sounds like by a court, right? It's repossessed by a court. So therefore, they say that it's the court that repossessed it, and then it's the original owner that comes to collect the principal amount because the field is ruined, so he can't just take the field back. But Rabba bar Rav Huna lo amar kerava harehi yosa mitachat yado be'ena mashma. And Rabba bar Rav Huna disagrees with Rava. He doesn't say when he destroyed the field and put caves and pits in it, because when you say repossessed, it sounds like it's in its current form, not that it's all ruined. And so therefore, he says, no, it's not that it was ruined, but rather it was taken by thugs. And so that's the case where the robber stole it. It's taken by thugs, and now but it's still in its current form. But he gets a chance. The original owner can collect money because now there's thugs that have the land and can't get them off, and so that therefore the robber has to pay from his money, and he can even has to pay from lien property for the principal amount. Okay, those are two answers, and now the third answer. Rav Asher Amar Listadin ketane kegon shegazal sadeh mechavero me'aperot v'achal et haperot u'machar et hasadeh ba lokech ligbot keren gove b'nechasim meshubadim ba nigzal ligabot perot gove b'nechasim b'nei achorim. Rav Asher says listadin, meaning there's two different parts of the case here. There's two different people that are trying to collect money from the robber. Someone steals a field from his friend and it had produce on it, and the thief ate all the produce, and then he sold the field. So when the buyer comes to collect the principal amount, which he has a right to, he can collect from even sold property of the robber. When the victim, the original owner, comes to collect his produce, so he can only collect from unsold property. That also solves the problem, because we're not talking about the robber coming to collect produce or enhancement of the field. No, it's the original owner. He certainly has a right to take the produce that actually was his. Now, ben l'Rava ben l'Rabba bar Rav Huna malveh al pehu u'malveh al peh eno goveh mechasim mishubadim. So now we go back to the cases of Rava and Rabba bar Rav Huna that say we're not talking about a buyer who comes to collect. See, if it's a buyer that comes to collect, the buyer has a sale document. So he has a documented claim, and any documented claim can be collected from lien property. That's why a buyer can collect from lien property of the robber. But according to Rava and Rabba bar Rav Huna, where there is no buyer, rather it's the original victim, the original owner of the field that's coming to collect the principal amount because he cannot take the land, either because the land is ruined or was taken by thugs. This will be considered an oral loan, and a loan that's only originated orally and has no documentation, one cannot collect from lien property. Why? There's no document here because what's the case? That some guy owns property, it's his. A robber comes and steals it. So now the court comes and says that's not yours, repossess it. Or thugs take it away. So then the original owner comes with a claim, that was my property, and now that property is not available for you to give me back, so you owe me the money, you owe me the value. But there's no documentation. So yes, the robber owes him the money, but since there's no documentation, it cannot be collected from lien property, and that the Spiraita says the principal can be collected from lien property. So how could this be? And the answer is, Hacha Maskinan Keshamad Bedin Hadar Zabin. Oh, we're talking about a case where he already stood trial first, and the court issued their verdict and said, you owe this guy $1 million. The robber, you owe the original owner of this land $1 million. You can't, the land is not available to give back, so you owe him. And after the verdict, before he paid, he had some other land that he owned, some good land that he sold. Now, that is the same as if there was in a written document. The whole point of a written document is that it's publicized. And since it's publicized, then we can tell the buyer, listen, you should have known that there was a lien on this property and taken that into account. So therefore, we can repossess it. But if it's only oral, then the buyer can say, there was no way for me to know, and so that would not be fair. But now, if a court issues a verdict about something, that's a lot of publicity. So therefore, the buyer of that land should have known that this guy owes $1 million to the victim of the robbery. The court just said so, and therefore he will know that this land might be repossessed, and so therefore it's valid to repossess it because the court verdict is the same as being on a written document. But you're right indeed. If the robber sells land before the verdict, then that land will be a final sale and the original owner, victim, cannot repossess it. Now we ask, Ihachi perot nameh. If so, that the verdict was already given, then why can't the owner also collect produce that was stolen from him, right? Remember that the land had produce on it at the time that it was stolen, and the robber consumed all the produce. So if they went to court, and the court presumably would have adjudicated the whole case, and he said, the claim would be this guy stole land worth $1 million, and there was produce on it that was worth $50,000, and they said, okay, so you owe $1,050,000, and that verdict was publicized, and then the robber sold some land that he had, so the original owner should be able to collect also the value of the produce from lien property. How come the Braita said not so? And the answer is Keshamad bedin al haken v'lo amad bedin al haperot. When he went to court, and the original owner sued only for the principal amount, but did not sue for the produce, and so there was no verdict, and publicity about the verdict. So he still owes him the amount of produce, but since there was no verdict, there's no lien on his land to pay for it. Umay paska. Now, why would you make a difference between this, the principal and the produce? And the answer is tamad milita ki taba inish karna taba beresha. As this is the normal way when a person makes a claim, he claims the principal amount, right? Deal with that. That's the most important thing. So he sues for that first, and then once he gets paid for that, he can go back and say, also there was produce that was on the land, but since that's secondary. We're talking about a case where he sued for the principal, the verdict came out, that was publicized, and therefore that's the same as a documented loan, and the original owner can collect the principal amount, but not the amount of the produce. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.